Over here.
Sorry.
Well, it doesn't help
There
if
you
I
go.
speak into a mic, does it? My name's Olivia. Thanks for coming. I have a question for you regarding the hearing on Russell Vought and Senator Bernie Sanders and how that involves with people of convicting faiths.
So I'm actually not familiar with what you're talking about, so say it one more time.
So Russell Vought was a potential deputy financial director.
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes. Bernie Sanders basically ripped the guy because he was a Christian, not because he'd actually used his Christianity in any way when it came to his job. It shows the radical intolerance that the left has for religion. Radical intolerance that the left has for religion. It's one of the reasons why I'm libertarian on the issue of marriage. I'm not libertarian on the issue of marriage because I believe in same-sex marriage on a personal level. I'm a religious guy. I don't. Right? But I'm libertarian on same-sex marriage because I know that what's coming next is that the left is going to use same-sex marriage as a club to beat the living hell out of religious people. They're going to shut down religious schools. They're going to take away tax-free status from churches. They're going to destroy religious homes. I mean, you see there was a piece of legislation that was just passed in Ontario that allows the government to remove children from homes if the parents don't approve of the transitioning of their own children. I mean, this is where the left is going to go, and Bernie Sanders is a part of that. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying.
Hi, Ben. Over here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm from Montana, and with our most recent election, thank you, whoever that was. Hi.
The one dude from Montana. Okay.
Yeah, there's two of us here. What Gianforte did, and for those of you who don't know, he body slammed a reporter, which please don't do that. It's really taken it. Conservatism in Montana has really taken a hit. How do we go about turning that back around?
Okay, so I think, number one, Gianforte did the right thing by coming out, acknowledging his mistake, and apologizing for it, obviously. That whole incident was very disturbing to me, not even because of what Gianforte did, although I thought, what in the world? But because I think there was a poll that said 42% of Republicans said that it was okay, basically. That is scary stuff. When I talk about truth over partisanship, this is the part where you have to be a decent human being, folks. Okay, you can still vote for Gianforte and say, with all of that said, it's still a binary choice. You can do that. But at the very least, let's acknowledge that you're not allowed to body slam other human beings. So I think that if people do that, then it's not a big deal. I mean, it's the same way I sort of feel about President Trump. It was one of my main objections to President Trump during the actual election cycle, was this feeling that people were ignoring bad things that he did in order to move him toward victory. And I understand voting for him. I do. I didn't live in a swing state. I live in California. But if I had lived in a swing state, maybe my calculus would have been different. I personally did not vote for either candidate. They didn't earn my vote. But I thought that when it comes to what I was worried about is the corruption of the moral heart of conservatism for temporary victory. And when people say things like, well, it's a civil war, we have to win now, that means all of our principles go out the window. If it's really a civil war, if you really believe it's that grave, then you should be picking up a gun. If it's still a civil society in which we have to have discussions with one another, you cannot approve of people body slamming one another or going to rallies and saying that they're going to pay the legal bills of people who punch other people. You can't do that. And it's okay to vote for that person, but you have to acknowledge that what they did is bad. This is not difficult. You would do the same thing with your own child. You would do the same thing with your friends. You would do the same thing with your boyfriends, your husbands. You would do... and there's not a person that you know who you love, who if they did something wrong, you wouldn't turn to them and say, you know what, you really shouldn't have done that. But we do it with our own politicians all the time. And it's really disturbing, and we need to cut that crap out. Because the more we do that, the worse it's going to get. The more the left is just going to look at us and say, you guys don't even have the moral wherewithal to stand on your own principles, let alone preach principles to us. Remember, we're the moral side. People say, well, why can't we do what the left does? Because we're the good guys, people. Okay, we're not allowed to do what the left does. If they're the black hats in this cowboy story, we're supposed to be wearing the white hats.
Hi, over here.
Okay, sorry about that.
I just want to thank you for being so nice to me back in the meet and greet. It made my trip really special, so thank you for that.
Oh, good. If I'd known who you were, I'd been so mean. Just mean and nasty and cruel.
Anyway, I go to a really liberal college in California, of course, as most of them are. What can I do as a student to make sure that my conservative voice, as well as the other conservative voices, are heard, as well as the other libertarian voices at my school?
So, I mean, the first thing that I would say is do most of your main lifting outside of class. So the big mistake I think a lot of college students make is they think that I'm going to talk back to the professor and now I'm a hero. Okay, well, if you talk back to the professor and then you get a C, then you just handed the professor the baton with which to club you. The point of going to college is to get good grades, make a lot of money, donate a lot of money to the school, and then get the professor fired who would grade people down. So the way that you convince people, I went to UCLA, obviously, for undergrad, and what that meant for me is that I would speak out in class, but we had blue books. I'm sure most people in this room still use blue books. You write anonymously, you have student ID numbers. So what I would do in class is I would mouth off as much as I wanted, and I didn't really care because I would always write like Bernie Sanders in the blue book. And that's how you end up graduating summa cum laude from UCLA as a conservative. But I would always, you have to kind of pick your spots is what I would say. And there are spots where it's more productive, and there are spots where it's less productive. I mean, there are classes where I'd work on other members of my class, and by the end of the class, half the class would be on my side of a particular issue. You can do that, but most of the work you're going to be doing is not going to be arguing with the professor. It's going to be talking with the other students outside your class. This is true in politics generally, by the way. Everybody thinks that it's the people who are in public life talking about politics all the time who convince tons and tons of people. Yeah, we convince lots of people, but the people who convince most of the people are you guys when you go home and talk to your friends. That's how most politics actually works, is on a one-to-one level.
Hello, my name is Olivia Rorich. Thank you so much for coming out here. I really appreciate it. Personally, for me, as a conservative woman, I am against having a tax on feminine hygiene products. However, I've noticed with other fellow conservatives, mostly older generations, they are for having a tax on feminine hygiene products, and I was just wondering, what is your opinion on this?
So my view of this is that there should be a tax on virtually nothing. So I mean, if we're talking about just a broad, if we're talking about just a broad version of let's not tax things as a general rule, I'm with you. If the idea is that we should make an exception for feminine hygiene products, I don't like tax subsidies and loopholes. I think that we should have a basic rule for all products. Either we're going to tax all the products the same, or we're not going to tax any of the products. That seems to me a better rule than trying to pick and choose which products are more important to people and which ones we should give them feedback on, or we should give them money back, or any of that sort of stuff. I'm not a big fan of tax subsidies.
The unholy alliance between the left and the forces and the Muslim supremacists, considering that the premises and the principles of both of them are mutually incompatible.
Okay, so they're not mutually incompatible to point A, they are to point B. What I mean is that it's a timeline. The left wants to tear down Western civilization because it thinks it's unequal. The radical Muslims want to tear down Western civilization because they think it's evil. So to the point of tearing down Western civilization, they're pretty much on the same page. It's where they go from there that's a problem, right? One side wants to build a caliphate and the other side wants to build a communist utopia. The reason that the left is routinely, and it's almost invariable, that the left ends up siding with the world's worst human beings in every situation is because, again, if you just go back to that fundamental leftist principle that equality of outcome is all that matters in life, that equality of outcome means that something just is happening, think about it. The real world is a place where God designed it this way. I believe this. God designed it not for every individual, but certainly for the vast bulk of humanity. If you do responsible, good things with your life, you will be more successful than if you do irresponsible, bad things with your life. Well, if the left believes that people who are unsuccessful are more virtuous, then what that means is that the non-virtuous are more virtuous, right? Because the people who are unsuccessful are generally not doing good, responsible things, and the left says, well, those people are victims, let's help them. Right? So the Muslims in the Middle East are victims of Israel. They must be victims of Israel because Israel's rich and its neighbors are not. So they must be victims. Well, the real reason the Muslims, the Palestinian Muslims, for example, are poor is because they've spent all the money that has been given to them, hundreds of billions of dollars, all the money that's been given to them over the course of decades, and they've spent it on terrorism, and they've spent it on stocking it away in their bank accounts of Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, and they've spent it on garbage, and they spent it on anti-Israel propaganda. That's the real reason they're poor. But the left looks at it and they say, they're poor. That means they're virtuous. This is why I hate it, really despise it, when Republicans do the whole, I'm a better person because I have a rags to riches story. You weren't a better person when you're poor. Okay, no one is a better person just because they're poor. By the way, no one's a better person because they're rich. All that wealth is a measure of how many voluntary exchanges you engaged in a free market. That's all that wealth is. But the idea for the left is that all inequality is evil. Therefore, the people who are unequal at the top are evil and the people at the bottom are virtuous.